It was a Saturday morning when I arrived at the property, and I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped inside. The familiar scent of the orchard, the one that always calmed my soul, was lost under the oppressive staleness of anxiety. The house was too quiet, eerily quiet, except for the soft clink of dishes coming from the kitchen. Then I saw her. Emily. My daughter, standing at the sink, her hands buried in soapy water. I froze in the doorway, unable to move as my eyes traced the sadness in her slumped shoulders. Her hair, usually so perfect, was tied in a messy ponytail, strands falling out as if even the simplest task had become too much for her. Her eyes, those eyes that once sparkled with determination, were swollen and red, dark circles weighing them down. She was crying silently, the kind of cry that doesn't need sound to be felt. I knew. In that moment, I knew I had made the worst mistake of my life. Behind her, in the living room that opened into the kitchen, the chaos was undeniable. The noise. The sense of entitlement. Michael's family had taken over. There, sprawled on the furniture like they owned the place, were at least 8 people. His mother, Linda, who had always looked at me like I was an obstacle in her way. His 2 sisters, their shrill voices cutting through the air, laughing like mockery. His younger brother David, who seemed oblivious to the storm he was helping create, smoking in the garden while his kids ran riot through the house, and my daughter, my Emily, was serving them. She was serving them like a maid in her own home. "Emily, where's the sugar?" one of the sisters called out, her voice dismissive, not even bothering to look at her. "Emily, these eggs are cold. Make me more." It was Michael's mother. Her tone was a command, and Emily obeyed without question. My heart clenched. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, and I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. This wasn't why I bought this house. This was not the dream I had in mind for my daughter when I handed her the keys. It had been 1.5 years since Emily had left her first marriage. A marriage that had drained her of everything: her spirit, her self-worth, her belief in herself. A man who abused her not with fists, but with silence, manipulation, and cruel words. When she left, she had nothing. Not even the car I'd given her for her 30th birthday. She came to my apartment with 2 suitcases and a heart shattered beyond repair. For months, I watched her as she walked through the house like a ghost, not knowing how to start over at 43. I couldn't stand to see her like that, so I made a choice. I took my savings, $45,000 I'd scraped together over 30 years of working as an accountant, money meant for my retirement, and I bought her a place. It wasn't huge, but it was beautiful. A couple of acres of land with fruit trees, a 3-bedroom house with windows that opened up to the garden. It was perfect, and that day, when I handed Emily the keys, when I saw her face, the tears in her eyes as she whispered, "It's really mine?" I knew I had made the right decision, but I never imagined this. I never imagined 6 months later she would meet Michael in a supermarket. I never imagined he would sweep her off her feet, charm her with the kind of attention she had longed for, only for him to bring his entire family into the home she had just begun to call hers. I never imagined his family would turn her sanctuary into their personal vacation spot. The laughter, the noise, the demands, it was all too much. And now, there she was, moving like a ghost between the kitchen and the living room, obeying their commands without a word of protest. They were treating her like she was nothing more than a servant, and I couldn't stand it. "How long have you all been here?" I asked, my voice calm, though my insides were roiling with fury. 2 weeks, Linda answered nonchalantly, not even looking up from the couch. "We're staying all summer. Michael invited us. He says there's plenty of room. What's the point of having a country house if you don't share it with family?" 2 weeks. My daughter had been living this hell for 2 weeks, and she hadn't said a word to me. Not one word. "And where is Michael?" I asked, my voice growing colder by the second. "He went out with his father to look at some land," Linda replied, settling back into the couch like she owned the place. "They'll be back for lunch. Emily, it's almost 11. You should start preparing something. You know how Michael likes to eat early." My blood began to boil. This was not the plan. This was not how I imagined it. I walked over to Emily, standing frozen by the sink, and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. She flinched like my touch burned her, and that's when I saw the red marks on her wrists. They were fresh, like she'd been scrubbing dishes and floors for hours without rest. Her hands were swollen, her nails broken and dirty. "Emily, I need to talk to you," I said softly. "Alone." But of course, Linda had to intervene. "Why don't you sit with us for a bit?" she said with that sweet, condescending tone, as if she were offering me a favor. "We're watching a great soap opera. Emily can bring you some coffee." "No," I said, my voice sharp and final. "I didn't come here to watch television. I came to talk to my daughter." Linda laughed, a hollow, humorless laugh that only made my rage grow. "Attitude, Helen," one of the sisters muttered, her words dripping with contempt. I turned to face her. "What attitude?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. The woman, her bleached blonde hair and long nails gleaming like a weapon, rolled her eyes. "Nothing," she muttered, too loudly for it to be dismissed. "Just saying Emily gets a little sensitive sometimes. As if doing a few chores is the end of the world." My patience snapped. "A few chores?" I repeated. "Is that what you think this is? Just a few chores?" I grabbed Emily's arm gently, pulling her away from the sink. "Come with me, now." She hesitated, looking at me with a mix of fear and relief, but she followed. The moment we stepped outside into the backyard, I could feel the tension easing, but only slightly. We reached the old swing set I had put up after buying the property, and I made her sit down. "Tell me everything," I said gently, taking her hands in mine, and then, as if all the emotions she had bottled up for weeks finally broke free, Emily began to cry. It wasn't the silent cry I had seen before. It wasn't even the hysterical sobbing I feared. This was different. It was deep, painful, and raw. The cry of someone who had been holding everything in for far too long. "I don't know how it happened, Mom," she sobbed. "Everything was going so well. Michael was so good to me, so different. He made me feel special, important. He never mentioned his family was like this." I hugged her tightly, letting her cry, letting the truth pour out of her. "You don't have to explain, honey. You don't have to apologize." She wiped her eyes, trembling. I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe I was the problem. But now I see it. I see how his mom. How she controls everything. How she makes me feel like I'm not enough. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would not let this happen. I would not let my daughter lose herself again. We were going to take this house back. We were going to take her life back. The moment I stepped back into the house, I knew everything was about to change. Emily remained silent behind me, her eyes cast downward as if she was already bracing for the storm. But there was no turning back now. The mess in the living room, the chaos that had taken over my daughter's life, was overwhelming. The family had made themselves at home in every sense, taking over the furniture, the kitchen, the air in the house. It was time to put an end to it. Linda was still lounging on the couch like the queen of the kingdom, her smile cold but triumphant. The sisters, Sarah and Jessica, were watching TV, their feet carelessly thrown up on my coffee table, ignoring the disarray around them. The kids were still running rampant, but the most damning sign of all was Emily. She was standing by the kitchen counter. Just like before, moving mechanically, following every order without complaint. Her face devoid of the joy I once knew. "Emily, come here," I called firmly, my voice cutting through the room. My daughter looked up, her red eyes meeting mine, filled with a mixture of relief and fear, as if my presence was both a comfort and a threat. "I'm busy, Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to finish cleaning up breakfast." I felt a surge of anger rise inside me, but I kept my voice calm. "Let someone else clean it. Come here, now." Linda chuckled. "Oh, Helen, don't be so dramatic. Emily is just helping with the chores. We're family, aren't we? Families help each other." Her words dripped with that false sweetness, and I felt my skin crawl. I could already feel the weight of the fight ahead. But it was a fight I was ready for. "This is my daughter's house, Linda," I said, my voice low but firm. "And I'm here to remind everyone of that." Linda's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Of course," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But it's also Michael's house. They're married, after all. What belongs to one belongs to the other." I took a step closer, never taking my eyes off her. This house belongs to Emily. It's in her name. Not Michael's, not yours. Emily, tell them whose house this is. Emily, who had been standing quietly by the counter, looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, confused, and filled with a pain I could feel in my bones. She hesitated for a moment, and I could see her fighting with herself. The fear, the guilt, everything she had been conditioned to believe was holding her back. Tell them, I urged her gently, stepping forward and taking her hand, and then, for the first time in weeks, I saw something shift in her eyes. She took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening just a little, her chin lifting slightly. It's mine, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but strong enough to carry the weight of the truth. It's mine. My mother gave it to me before I even met Michael. It's only in my name. The room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The tension in the air was so thick I could almost taste it. I could see the confusion in Linda's eyes, the fear flickering behind her calculated smile. She hadn't expected this. Well, Linda said, her voice suddenly brittle, that doesn't change anything, does it? Emily wants us here. She's always been so sweet, so generous. She's not like other daughters-in-law who are selfish. I could feel Emily's body stiffen beside me, her hands trembling in mine. I turned to her, my heart breaking for the woman I had raised. Do you want them here, Emily? I asked gently, looking her in the eyes. She opened her mouth to answer, but then hesitated. The weight of the years of conditioning was still heavy on her shoulders. I saw it in her eyes, the desire to please, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But this was not the time for silence. I took a step forward, putting my hand on her arm gently but firmly. Tell the truth, honey. Do you want them here? A long silence stretched between us, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't be able to answer. But then, with a quiet but powerful strength, she spoke. No, she said, her voice shaky but clear. I don't want them here. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the kids stopped their noise for a moment. Linda's face twisted with rage, her eyes narrowing as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You can't be serious, Linda spat, her voice rising. After everything we've done for you, after we accepted you into this family, after your son saved you from being a lonely, divorced woman, I cut her off. Saved her? I repeated, my voice ice cold. Your son didn't save anyone, Linda. Emily had her own life before he came along. She didn't need saving. And as for your family, I turned to face the room, you've been using her. You've turned her house into your personal hotel, and she's been your servant. You've taken her money, her energy, her peace. And I won't stand by and let you do that anymore. Linda's face reddened, her lips tightening into a thin, furious line. How dare you, she hissed, taking a step toward me. This is my son's house, and I have every right to be here. No, I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through her fury. It's not your son's house. And you have no right to be here. I felt the tension in the room escalate, and I knew this was just the beginning. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. Michael will be back soon, Linda threatened, her voice laced with venom. He'll take our side. You'll regret this. I didn't flinch. Michael can choose whatever side he wants, I said. But this house, this life, this belongs to Emily. And if he can't see that, then maybe he needs to take a long, hard look at what kind of man he wants to be. The room was silent once more. Even Linda, who had spent the last 2 weeks undermining my daughter, was finally at a loss for words. Emily, I said softly, turning to her. Let's go outside. We need to talk. As we moved toward the back door, I could feel her trembling beside me. She didn't speak, but her presence beside me was the only comfort I needed. We stepped out into the backyard, away from the oppressive atmosphere in the house. And I finally let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Tell me everything, I said, kneeling in front of her as she collapsed onto the old swing set, and this time, she didn't hold back. She let the floodgates open, her sobs full of years of pent-up pain, betrayal, and exhaustion. I let her cry. I held her, and I promised her, with every fiber of my being, that I would do everything in my power to make sure she never had to go through this again. The morning air outside was cool. But the tension inside the house was suffocating. I could feel it building with every passing second as Emily and I stood in the yard, far enough away to catch our breath, but close enough to hear the noise of Michael's family still running rampant through the house. The sound of dishes clinking, of children shouting, and the almost mocking laughter from his sisters echoed in the distance. They had no idea what was coming. Emily's hands were still trembling in mine, her eyes distant as she wiped away the last of her tears. I could see the battle inside her loyalty to her husband, her fear of confrontation, and the guilt that had been slowly eating away at her since the family arrived. But this wasn't just about her marriage anymore. This was about her dignity, her peace, and her home. "Are you ready?" I asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She nodded but didn't speak. She didn't need to. I could see the change in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. A spark of resolve. She was finally waking up to the truth. She was reclaiming her power. We walked back inside the house, our footsteps muffled on the wooden floors as the chaos continued in the living room. The sight of Linda sprawled across the couch, her feet up on my coffee table like she owned the place, made my blood boil. Michael's sisters were still watching TV, their eyes glued to the screen as if nothing was wrong, while the kids left toys and crumbs everywhere. The house was a disaster, and not one of them was lifting a finger to help. I could feel the anger rising in me again, but this time, I wasn't going to let it consume me. I was going to take control of this situation. I was going to make sure my daughter's voice was heard. Linda barely glanced up when we walked into the room. "Well, look who's back," she said with that same sickly sweet tone, her eyes flicking over Emily and me before returning to the TV. "We were just discussing dinner plans. You've been so quiet, Helen. What's wrong? Losing your nerve?" I stepped forward, blocking the view of the TV with my body. Every eye in the room turned toward me, and I could feel the tension in the air thickening. Linda's smug smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I didn't come here to watch TV, I said, my voice steady but firm. "I came here to talk about the rules in this house. And since it seems like no one else wants to respect them, I'll have to do it for you." Linda raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my boldness. "Rules?" she repeated, as if the word itself was foreign to her. "What are you talking about? This is Michael's house, and he invited us here. We're family." I shook my head, feeling my heart beat faster with every word. "This house is not Michael's. It's Emily's. It's hers. And as long as she's living here, she's the one who gets to make the rules. Not you. Not anyone else. You've overstayed your welcome, Linda. And now, it's time to leave." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. The sisters exchanged looks, their faces full of disbelief. Sarah scoffed, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You can't just kick us out," she sneered. "We're family. Michael invited us." I met her gaze head on, my voice never wavering. "Your brother may have invited you, but it's Emily's home. And if she says you need to leave, then you need to leave. This isn't a hotel. It's not your personal vacation spot. And you're not going to treat my daughter like your personal maid." Linda's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw a crack in her confidence. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're just going to let your daughter, your grown daughter, kick us out like this? After everything we've done for you?" I let her words hang in the air for a moment, then shook my head slowly. "Everything you've done for her? You've done nothing but take from her. You've taken her money, her peace, her home. You've made her feel worthless in her own house. And that ends today." Linda's face turned a shade of red that made me wonder if she would explode from the pressure. Her lips trembled with rage, but there was something else in her eyes now, fear. She hadn't expected to be confronted like this. She hadn't expected Emily to have a voice. "Michael's not here to defend us," Linda spat, looking at Emily with venom. "Are you really going to let your mother come in here and destroy your marriage?" The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. I could see her hesitate, her body stiffening as the guilt tried to creep back in. But I wouldn't let her fall back into that place of doubt. I stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't about destroying your marriage, Emily," I said softly, my voice full of reassurance. "This is about your peace. Your happiness. Your right to live in your own home without being made to feel small." Emily swallowed hard, and for a second, I saw the conflict in her eyes. But then, slowly, she looked at me. The spark of determination was back. I don't want them here, Mom, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I don't want to be treated like this anymore. Linda's mouth hung open in shock, and for a moment, no one spoke. The silence that followed was deafening. The sisters seemed frozen, unsure of what to do now that the power had shifted. Finally, I turned to Emily. It's your decision, honey. No one has the right to stay here if you don't want them. Not Michael, not anyone. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Michael wasn't here, and yet I felt the weight of his absence more than ever. This was his family, and the man I had once thought capable of defending his wife was nowhere to be found. But I had no time to dwell on that. This was about Emily. And whatever happened next, it was time for her to take control of her life again. Linda opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave, I said, my voice low but firm. If you don't, I'll be calling the police. I'm done with this. The room went deathly quiet. The silence in the room was so thick, it felt like the air itself had frozen. I could hear the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint rustling of footsteps in the hallway, but in that moment, no one spoke. The walls seemed to close in on us, as if even the house itself were holding its breath. Linda's face was twisted in shock, disbelief spreading across her features like a dark shadow. Michael's sisters looked between each other, their expressions a mixture of confusion and frustration. But it was Emily who stood at the center of it all, her body tense and fragile, caught in the storm of her family's manipulation. I held my breath, watching as the moment stretched into what felt like an eternity. Linda's eyes flicked to her son's family portraits hanging on the wall, then to Emily, who stood behind me with a quiet resolve I hadn't seen in weeks. Michael's going to be furious, Linda finally spoke, her voice thick with venom. You don't know what you're doing, Helen. You think you're helping? You're only destroying everything. Your daughter is going to lose everything, her marriage, her family, because of you. I could see her words landing like daggers aimed at Emily's heart. Each sentence wrapped in guilt, designed to tear her down. But this time, the cracks in Linda's control were beginning to show. Emily's shoulders stiffened, her eyes wide but unwavering. Not anymore, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. I turned to Emily, locking eyes with her, making sure she understood. You are not responsible for this. What they've done to you, how they've manipulated you, none of this is your fault. I took a deep breath, feeling the heat of the moment pushing my resolve to its limit. I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't undo. But in that moment, there was no going back. I couldn't let my daughter suffer any longer, not under the thumb of these manipulative people. Not in her own home. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but there was something else there now, a quiet strength that had been missing before. She wiped her eyes, but this time, she didn't look away. She didn't shrink back. She was standing up for herself, and in that moment, I could see the woman I had raised emerging from the shadow of years of silence and fear. I'm not going to let them destroy everything. Mom, Emily said, her voice barely a whisper but filled with more conviction than I had ever heard from her. A pang of pride hit me in the chest, and I gave her hand a firm squeeze. You've already done more than enough, I said. Now, let's finish this. Linda's lips curled into a sneer. She had clearly underestimated Emily's resolve. She turned to Sarah and Jessica, giving them an almost imperceptible nod. You've both heard this, she said, her voice coated in bitterness. I'll be damned if I let a woman like Helen take my family apart. I've raised my son to be a man. He'll make sure this gets fixed. Don't worry, I'll make sure you all hear from him. Her words hung in the air, but I wasn't worried anymore. Michael's indecision had cost him. It had cost his wife, and it had cost his mother, who couldn't hold on to her grip on him any longer. But most importantly, it had cost his family the right to be there, in Emily's home, treating her like a doormat. Emily, I said, speaking softly but firmly, turning her attention back to me. You can take this house back. It's yours. You don't have to let them control it, or you, any longer. Emily's gaze flickered between me and the chaos in the room. Her hands shook a little, but her eyes held a new clarity. What if Michael doesn't agree with me? She asked, her voice trembling. You've already done more than enough, I repeated, gently guiding her toward the door. Now, we're going to stand here. We're going to be strong. And we'll make sure that when Michael gets here, he knows where his priorities lie. He can choose who he defends. The room was tense with silence as we moved toward the door. But then, the sound of car tires crunching on the gravel outside shattered the quiet. My heart sped up. Michael was back, the storm was about to break, the sound of the gravel under the tires grew louder, signaling that Michael and his father had returned. I could feel the tension in the air thicken as we stood in the doorway, waiting. The atmosphere in the room was electric with anticipation. But it wasn't just Linda's wrath or Emily's uncertainty that had my pulse racing, it was the sheer weight of the decision Michael would have to make. Would he finally choose his wife? The woman he had promised to love and protect? Or would he cave to the pressure of his family, as he had done before? The silence in the house felt suffocating as I glanced at Emily, who was standing beside me, her face a mask of both hope and fear. "You okay?" I asked softly, keeping my voice steady, though I could feel my own emotions swirling inside me. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed her. "I don't know, Mom. I just don't know what he's going to say. What if he sides with them? What if I lose him?" I shook my head, my hand still resting on her shoulder. "If he can't see what's happening here, then it's not a marriage worth saving. You deserve better than this, Emily. You deserve to be loved and respected, not used and controlled." As I spoke, I could see the battle in her eyes. The same battle I had fought years ago. The fear of being alone. The fear of being judged for making the right choice. The fear of walking away from someone you loved, even when you knew they were wrong for you. But this wasn't just about her marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming her life, her home, her worth. And I wouldn't let her back down. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. The front door opened with a creak, and I heard Michael's voice. "What's going on in here?" His voice was laced with confusion as he stepped into the room, followed by his father. The scene in the living room must have shocked him. His family was in chaos, everyone scrambling to collect their things, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. His eyes quickly darted to the suitcases piled up, to the strained expressions on Linda's and the others' faces, and then his gaze turned to me. And I could see the confusion in his eyes, followed by a flicker of something else. Something like guilt. "Michael," I said, my voice firm but calm, "you need to hear this. Your family has been here for 2 weeks, treating Emily like a servant, using her hospitality without contributing a single thing. They've made her life miserable. And I'm done watching it." Michael opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off before he could defend his family. "No. You're not going to defend them this time. You're going to listen. This house, this life, is Emily's. And she has every right to ask them to leave." His face hardened, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. His mother was standing behind him, her arms crossed, her expression one of righteous indignation. "Helen, this is ridiculous," Linda spat. "You can't just come in here and kick us out. This is Michael's house too." I stepped forward, planting myself in front of Linda with unwavering determination. "No, Linda. This house is Emily's, and it's time for you all to leave." Michael took a deep breath, his eyes flicking between his mother and his wife. The silence was deafening as he looked at the 2 women who had defined the course of his life, his mother, the manipulator, the woman who had controlled him for so long. And Emily, the woman he had married, the woman who had stood by him, despite everything. For a moment, I thought he might collapse under the pressure. His face was a mix of confusion, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place, regret, maybe, or fear, but then something shifted in his expression, something that made my heart skip a beat. He straightened up, his jaw set in a firm line. "This isn't easy for me," he began, his voice low but steady. "But I can't ignore what's happening anymore. I've been blind. I've let my family walk all over Emily, and I've done nothing to stop it." I could feel the weight of his words settle in the room. It wasn't just a confession, it was a decision. A choice. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "I should have defended you. I should have seen what was happening, but I was too afraid to confront them. I was scared of losing my family." He turned to his mother, his voice growing firmer. "But I've made my choice. My family is Emily now. And no one, not even you, gets to treat her like this." For a split second, Linda's face twisted with disbelief, and I could see the fury bubbling just beneath the surface. She opened her mouth to say something, but Michael held up his hand, silencing her. "You don't get to do this anymore," he said, his voice finally gaining strength. "I've let you control everything for too long, and I won't let you control my marriage." The room was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I saw something in Emily's eyes: relief. A spark of hope. It wasn't just about Michael defending her anymore. It was about him choosing her. Choosing to stand by her, even when it meant going against everything he had known his whole life. But Linda wasn't done yet. "You'll regret this, Michael," she said, her voice tight with venom. "You're choosing her over your own blood. Over your own mother." "Enough, Linda," Michael replied, his voice firm. "I've made my decision. You need to leave. All of you. Now." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pain in Linda's eyes, a fleeting recognition that she had lost control. Sarah, Jessica, and David remained silent, their expressions a mixture of resentment and shock. The tension was palpable as they stood, unwilling to move, their eyes darting between Michael and Linda. But in the end, it was Michael who had the final say. "1 hour," he said, his voice carrying the finality of a command. "Get your things, and leave. I'll make sure you have somewhere to stay, but you're not staying here." As Michael's family began to collect their things, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The fight was over. Emily was free, and yet, as Linda and the others packed their bags, the bitterness lingered in the air. I could feel it in every corner of the house. The war wasn't over. But at least, for now, my daughter had won. The hour that followed was nothing short of chaotic. The sound of footsteps running through the house, the clattering of bags and boxes being stuffed into cars, the murmur of heated whispers, and the occasional slam of a door filled the air. The tension was palpable, but even as the last of Michael's family trickled out, I could feel a strange sense of relief settling into my chest. It was over. The fight had been hard, but my daughter was freed. I watched as the family packed their things. Sarah, Jessica, and David all muttering under their breath, their eyes shooting daggers at Emily and me as they grabbed anything they could claim as theirs. The kids, confused and upset by the sudden upheaval, were the only ones who didn't understand the true nature of the battle that had just taken place. But for the rest of them, those who had overrun my daughter's life for 2 weeks, it was a bitter end. They had been forced to leave, but not without leaving their mark. "Michael's going to be furious," Linda hissed, her face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this, all of you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd made my decision, and I had no intention of looking back. Emily deserved peace, and if Michael couldn't see that, then he had made his own choice. The last of the suitcases were thrown into the cars, and the sound of the engine starting up outside signaled that they were finally gone. I stayed in the living room, my eyes on the front door, waiting for the final piece of this puzzle to fall into place. The front door opened, and Michael stepped inside, his face drawn with exhaustion. His father had already left, having taken the side of silence in the chaos. Now it was just Michael and me, facing the aftermath of what had just transpired. His eyes flicked to me, then to Emily, who was standing behind me, her arms folded tightly across her chest as if she were still unsure of what had just happened. "Is it really over?" Emily asked, her voice so small that it broke my heart. I turned to her, smiling softly, trying to reassure her that everything would be okay now. "It is," I said firmly. "They're gone. And now, it's time to rebuild. It's your house, Emily. You've taken control of your life again." But Michael's presence, the weight of the man who was supposed to stand by her side, still loomed in the room. He stepped forward slowly, his gaze shifting between Emily and me. He looked tired, defeated, but there was something else in his eyes now: guilt. Regret. "Mom," he began. His voice strained. I don't even know where to begin." I crossed my arms, waiting for him to continue. This was the moment, the one where he had to finally choose his wife, the woman who had stood by him, or the mother who had manipulated him for years. There was no middle ground anymore. "I know what I should have done," he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. "I should have stood up for you, Emily. I should have defended you from the start, but I was too weak. Too afraid of my mother, of losing her love. I was blinded by everything she'd put into my head. Emily didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her hands trembling slightly. She had already gone through so much, and I could see the uncertainty still clouding her eyes. Was this truly the man she had married? The man who had stood by her side when she needed him most? Or was he the same man who had ignored her cries for help? I'm sorry, Michael continued, stepping closer to Emily. I should have been the man you needed. I should have been the husband you deserved. And I wasn't. I failed you. I could see Emily struggling with the emotions bubbling inside her. Her lips parted, as if she were about to say something, but she hesitated. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Why did you let them do this to me, Michael? Why didn't you see what they were doing? Why didn't you defend me when it mattered? Her words were like daggers, each one piercing his heart. I could see the weight of her question sinking in, and it was like watching him unravel before my eyes. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he walked toward her slowly, reaching out as if he were afraid of being rejected. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry. I let them take over our lives, and I should have been there. I should have seen it sooner. She stepped back, her hands raised as if to create some distance between them. You should have, she whispered. You should have seen it. You should have been on my side, Michael. A silence stretched between them, and I felt the weight of that silence settle over us. The truth was out in the open now. Michael had seen the damage his family had done, and he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. But the damage to their marriage had already been done. The question was, could they rebuild? I didn't know how to fight her, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been programmed my whole life to please her, to put her first. But I've realized now that I can't keep doing that. I can't keep letting her control me. For a moment, Emily didn't respond. She just stared at him, her arms still folded tightly across her chest. The weight of his apology hung in the air like an unspoken promise, but there was something more that still needed to be said. Emily, I can't change the past, he continued, his voice shaking now. But I can change now. I will. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. To prove to you that you're my priority. Not my mother. You. Just you. I watched Emily carefully, waiting for her reaction. Her face was still a mix of pain and doubt, but I could see something softening in her eyes. The anger wasn't gone, but there was a flicker of something else, hope. Do you really mean that? She asked softly, her voice fragile, like a thread about to snap. I do, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll prove it to you, Emily. I'll prove it every day from now on. I won't let her control us anymore. I promise. For a moment, neither of them moved. But then, slowly, Emily took a step toward him, her arms uncrossing, her hands trembling. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words, then finally, she spoke again. I hope you do, Michael, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I really hope you do. And just like that, I could see a shift in their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was a start. I stepped back, letting them have their moment. I didn't need to interfere. Michael had made his choice. Now, it was up to him to prove he could follow through. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The house was quieter now, almost too quiet. The echoes of Linda and her family's departure still hung in the air, but there was a sense of calm slowly settling over the place. The chaos had subsided, but the emotional aftermath lingered like a heavy fog. Emily and Michael had retreated to the kitchen. Their voices soft but clear as they began to talk, really talk, for the first time in what felt like forever. I stayed back, giving them the space they needed to navigate the raw emotions that had bubbled to the surface. It was their moment to heal, and I knew that no matter what happened next, they had to rebuild on their own. I moved through the house, straightening up the mess left behind, trying to give myself something to focus on. There were dishes in the sink, crumbs on the floor, and toys scattered in every corner. The house had been overtaken, but now, as the last remnants of the invasion were slowly cleaned up, I began to see a change. This was no longer a place of oppression. It was a home again. I made my way to the back porch, sitting on the swing that Emily had always loved as a little girl. The breeze was gentle, carrying with it the scent of fresh air and the faintest hint of blooming flowers from the garden. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the moment wash over me. I could finally breathe. The door to the kitchen opened behind me, and I turned to see Emily stepping out, her face soft but tired. She had a gentle smile on her lips, one that hadn't been there in weeks. Michael stood just behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, looking at her with an intensity that spoke volumes. There was a new tenderness in his eyes, one that I hadn't seen before. "We've been talking," Emily said, her voice calm but with a newfound strength. "We're going to work on things, Mom. Really work on them." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. It wasn't perfect, and there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Emily was standing tall. She wasn't just surviving. She was finally living. "I'm proud of you, honey," I said softly, my voice catching in my throat. "Both of you. This is your chance to rebuild, to find your way back to each other. But you have to keep putting each other first. No more letting anyone take that from you." Michael nodded, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that had been missing before. "I know. I'm going to be better. I'll be there for her, no matter what. I promise." Emily squeezed his hand, her smile growing wider. It was small, tentative, but it was there. The cracks in their marriage hadn't been repaired overnight. But there was a glimmer of hope, a possibility of something better. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it was filled with understanding. I could see the uncertainty in both of their eyes, the lingering fear that the damage might be too deep. But I also saw something else, a quiet optimism. A recognition that they were worth fighting for. After a few moments, I stood up and walked toward them, my hands resting on Emily's shoulders as I pulled her into a warm embrace. She held me tightly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off my chest. She was safe. She was strong. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm going to be okay." "I know you will," I replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. Always have been." We pulled apart, and I could see the change in her. The shell she had built around herself, the fear of standing up to her past, was beginning to crack. She was becoming the woman she had always been destined to be, bold, confident, and unapologetically herself. Michael cleared his throat, looking at both of us with a new sense of responsibility. "I've already spoken to my mom," he said quietly. "I've told her I need space from her. And if she's ever going to be a part of our lives again, she'll have to respect our boundaries. I'm not going to let her come between us anymore." I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders as well. The decision had been made, and now, they had to live with it. But there was no going back. The house, their life, their marriage, everything was finally in their hands. "Thank you, Michael," Emily said, her voice full of gratitude. "For listening. For seeing me." He nodded, his hand resting on her back, the gesture simple but full of meaning. "I should have done it sooner. But I'll never make that mistake again." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, taking in the quiet peace that had finally returned to the house. It was a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes after a storm has passed and the clouds begin to clear. The weight of everything that had happened still lingered. But now there was hope, hope that things could be better. That they could heal. "We have a lot of work to do," I said, breaking the silence, my voice steady. "But we'll do it together. And we'll make this house a home again. A real alma." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Together," she repeated, and just like that, I knew, this was the beginning of something new. Something beautiful. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be bumps along the way, but the journey had started, and that was enough for now. The days that followed were a delicate mix of tension and relief. The house, which had once felt like a prison, was now starting to feel like a place of healing again. Emily and Michael spent hours talking, working through the confusion and hurt that had built up between them. Their conversations weren't easy, but they were necessary. They talked about boundaries, trust, and respect. They discussed the kind of marriage they both wanted, one built on mutual understanding, not manipulation or fear. The air in the house felt different, lighter. It wasn't perfect yet, but there was a sense of possibility. Emily was slowly finding her voice again, and Michael was learning to listen. Every day, I saw small shifts, the way Michael looked at her with tenderness, the way Emily responded with a quiet strength. For the first time in months, it felt like they were really on the same team. I spent my time helping where I could, but mostly, I kept my distance. This was their fight, their path to walk. All I could do was support them, just as I had always done. But now, there was something else. There was a quiet pride in the way my daughter was handling things. She wasn't just surviving. She was standing tall again. One evening, a week after the confrontation with Michael's family, Emily invited me over for dinner. The house was almost unrecognizable, fresh flowers in the garden, new curtains hanging in the windows, and a new table set up in the dining room. It felt warm and inviting, the way a home should. I could see how much effort they had both put into making it their own again, a symbol of their renewed commitment to each other. "Do you like it?" Emily asked, her eyes bright with pride. She had set the table herself, carefully placing each dish and ensuring everything was just right. Michael was in the kitchen, finishing up the last of the preparations, a smile on his face as he glanced over at her. It was the first time in weeks that I saw them working together in such harmony. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It feels like a fresh start." We sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and light-hearted moments. Michael and Emily exchanged looks and inside jokes, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over me. It wasn't perfect, and there was still work to be done, but they were starting to find their way again. And for the first time in a long time, Emily looked truly happy. "Michael, I'm proud of you," I said, breaking the silence. He looked up from his plate, his expression a mix of surprise and modesty. "I'm proud of both of you," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "We're going to make this work. Together." And there it was. The promise. It wasn't a grand gesture or a sweeping declaration, but it was enough. It was the kind of promise that came from deep understanding, from a place of growth. Michael had seen the damage done by his family's manipulation, and now he was ready to make amends. Emily had found her strength again, and she was no longer afraid to speak her truth. Together, they were building something new. Something real. After dinner, as we sat together on the porch, the sun setting behind us, Michael spoke again. "You were right, Helen," he said, his voice steady. "I should have protected her from the start. I should have seen it. I let my family control me, but I won't let that happen again. I love her, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to show her that." I nodded, my heart full. "I know you will, Michael. And Emily, she's always had it in her. She's stronger than she knows. And now, she has you by her side." Emily smiled, her face glowing in the soft light of the setting sun. "I'm starting to believe that again. That I can be strong. That I can do this." The next few days were a whirlwind of small changes, but they were the right kind of changes. Emily and Michael worked together to set new boundaries with his family, and while it wasn't easy, they were slowly carving out the life they both wanted. There were phone calls from Linda, her voice pleading and manipulative, but Michael held firm. They had agreed that no one would visit unless they respected Emily's space, and that was non-negotiable. "I'll be patient," Linda had said over the phone, her tone still laced with her usual guilt trip. "I just want to be a part of Michael's life again." And Michael had responded with clarity, his voice stronger than I had ever heard it. "I understand, Mom. But right now, I need to focus on my marriage. I need to protect it. And if you really want to be a part of my life, you'll respect that." The next time Linda called, Emily was the one who spoke. Her voice was firm but calm, her words not filled with anger but with quiet strength. "I need time, Linda. I need space to heal. And if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to earn it. Not through guilt, not through manipulation, but through respect." For the first time in a long while, Linda fell silent. There was no comeback, no excuse. She knew her game had been exposed. It wasn't a perfect solution. The road ahead would be long and full of challenges, but the difference now was that Emily had found her voice. And Michael had found his strength to stand beside her. It had been a few weeks since the confrontation. And while the dust had settled in many ways, the emotional scars were still there, faint, but undeniable. Michael and Emily had grown closer, their conversations deeper, their connection more genuine than I had ever seen it. They were learning to communicate, to prioritize each other, and to understand what had been broken, and how it could be fixed. There was peace in the house again, but I knew, deep down, that there was still one more hurdle to overcome. The silence from Linda had stretched on for weeks. After the final phone call with Emily, where she had set the boundary, Linda had not called again. She'd sent a few texts, each one more apologetic than the last, filled with her guilt-ridden words and promises to change. But I could feel that her change wasn't going to be enough. She was too set in her ways, too entrenched in her manipulative behaviors. Still, I knew Michael had to face his mother again. He had to see if she truly could respect the boundaries they'd put in place. I just hoped he wasn't doing it out of obligation, but because he wanted to. One Saturday afternoon, as I sat with a cup of tea on the porch, I saw Michael drive up the gravel driveway. His car came to a halt, and he stepped out, walking toward me with that familiar, conflicted look on his face. I could tell something was weighing on him. "Hey, Michael," I said, giving him a soft smile. "What's on your mind?" He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before answering. "I'm going to see my mom," he said quietly, his gaze shifting to the ground. "She called again. This time, she said she understood why I had to set boundaries. But I don't know if I believe it. I don't know if she can really change." I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't just afraid of facing his mother. He was afraid of what would happen if he let her back in, of what it would cost Emily, of what it might do to their marriage. "You're afraid she'll manipulate you again," I said gently, my voice steady. He nodded. "I'm afraid I'll fall into the same patterns. She's done it for so long. She's always made me feel like I owe her, that I have to choose her over everyone else." I sat back, considering his words. Michael was a good man, but for so many years, he had been stuck between two loyalties, his wife and his mother. He had failed to see that true love and loyalty required standing by the person who had chosen you, who had been with you through thick and thin. "You can't fix her, Michael," I said, my tone firm. "She has to do that for herself. But you can protect Emily. You can protect your marriage. And if that means you have to step away from your mom, then that's what you have to do." He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "I know. But it's hard. It's my mother. She's always been there, even when things were bad." I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to offer some reassurance. "She hasn't been there for Emily, Michael. She's manipulated both of you for far too long. This isn't about choosing one over the other. This is about protecting your wife from someone who doesn't have her best interests at heart." Michael sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. I don't know if I can go through with this. But I have to. I don't want Emily to ever feel like she's second to anyone again. She's everything to me." A deep sense of pride welled up inside me. For the first time, I saw the man Michael could be, the man he was meant to be. Strong, decisive, and unafraid of standing up for what truly mattered. "You will," I said, giving him a reassuring smile. "You're already doing it. You've chosen Emily. And you're not alone in this. She'll be by your side, no matter what happens." Michael nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I know. I don't know how to make her understand that I'm doing this for us. For our future." I stood up, putting my arm around him briefly, a gesture of comfort. "You don't have to explain it all. Actions speak louder than words. She'll see it in you, see how much you've grown, how much you've changed. And if she's willing to change, too, then maybe you'll find a way to make it work. But if not, then you'll know that you've done everything you can." He looked at me, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Helen. I needed to hear that." I watched as Michael walked back to his car, his steps a little lighter, a little more determined. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I could see that he was ready to face it. And with Emily by his side, I knew they could overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. The next few days passed slowly, and I could feel the unease lingering in the air as we waited for Michael to return. Emily spent her time rearranging the house, tidying up the garden, and focusing on the little things that brought her peace. It was a quiet rhythm, the kind of calm that can only come after a storm has passed. Then, late one afternoon, Michael returned. He walked through the door with a quiet sense of resolve, his face a little paler than usual but his posture straighter. He didn't say anything right away, but I could see the tension in his shoulders had eased. Emily looked up from the kitchen counter, her eyes searching his face for any sign of what had happened. I talked to her, Michael said softly, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't easy. But I told her everything. About the boundaries. About what we need to move forward. And? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She listened, he said, a hesitant smile forming on his lips. She didn't like it, but she listened. She said she would respect our space. For now, at least. I don't know if she'll change completely, but I think she understands. Relief washed over Emily's face, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her truly relax. The tension that had been holding her in place was starting to break. You did it, Michael, Emily whispered, her voice full of gratitude and love. You chose us. Michael stepped forward, taking her hand in his eyes filled with the weight of the promise he had just made. I'm sorry it took me so long, he said quietly. But I'll never let you feel second again, Emily. You're my family now. You always have been. I stood back, watching the two of them together, the bond between them stronger than it had ever been. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was all they needed. The weeks that followed Michael's confrontation with his mother were a mixture of peace and quiet reflection. There was still an undercurrent of tension in the air, but it was no longer the suffocating kind. It was the kind of tension that accompanies change, that marks the beginning of something new. Something healthier. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. Emily and Michael had taken a major step toward healing. And the foundation of their marriage had started to shift in a way that felt more like a solid structure and less like a fragile house of cards. They were learning to communicate, learning how to set the boundaries that would protect their peace. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when they stumbled. But they had something they hadn't had before, mutual respect and understanding. I spent a lot of time with Emily during those weeks. Watching her slowly come back to life, watching her rediscover her strength and her voice, filled me with pride. I had raised a woman who had been through hell, who had fought battles both seen and unseen, and she was still standing. Stronger than ever. She was learning how to carve out a space for herself in a world that often tried to drown her voice. We spent our mornings in the garden, planting new flowers that Emily had picked out. A symbol of her new beginning. She spoke more about her dreams, her bakery, her business, the life she had always wanted but had never felt worthy of. Now, she was ready to build it. With Michael by her side, the future didn't seem so daunting. I never thought I'd get to this point, she said one morning as we finished planting the last of the flowers. I used to be so scared. Of failing. Of being alone. Of being hurt again. I smiled, wiping the sweat from my brow. It's normal to be afraid, honey. It's just that fear doesn't get to control you anymore. You've learned that. I have, she said quietly, glancing at Michael, who was watching us from the porch with a smile. And I think I'm ready to finally let go of everything that's been holding me back. All the guilt. The shame. The fear. I hugged her tightly, not needing words to convey the depth of my love for her. She was my daughter, my heart, and watching her reclaim her life was the greatest gift I could ever receive. Later that evening, Michael and Emily invited me to join them for dinner. The house felt even more like a home now, fresh, vibrant, and full of life. The air was warm with the smell of food cooking, and the sound of Emily and Michael laughing together in the kitchen was the sweetest music to my ears. I could hear the soft clink of dishes and the murmurs of conversation, things that had once seemed so ordinary but now felt like miracles. Everything feels right. Mom, Emily said as we sat down to eat, her smile brighter than I had seen in months. It feels like we've finally found our way back to each other. Like we're building something real. Something we deserve. I couldn't help but smile back, the joy in her voice spreading through me like light. You do deserve it, Emily. Both of you. You've fought hard for this. Michael, who had been quiet until then, looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. I can't say I've always been the man I should have been, Helen, he said softly. But I'm trying now. I'm learning to be better. For her. For us. I nodded, my heart swelling. You're already doing it, Michael. You're showing up. And that's what matters. The conversation shifted to their future plans, talks of starting Emily's baking business. Finding a bigger space for it, and how they were going to manage the balance between work and life. There was a new sense of purpose in their voices. A sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. As I listened to them, I realized something: they had come a long way, but they still had a long road ahead. Marriage wasn't a destination, it was a journey. A journey they were ready to take together, with each other's support and with the lessons they had learned from the past. It was a beautiful evening, filled with laughter, food, and the kind of warmth that could only come from true healing. The past wasn't gone, it would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined them. They had taken their pain, their struggles, and turned them into something stronger. Something that would carry them forward. Later that night, after dinner, as I stood on the porch looking out at the garden, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't known in years. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything, and the world felt peaceful. There was still so much ahead for Emily and Michael, but I knew that whatever came next, they were ready for it. This was the beginning of their new chapter. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Emily and Michael standing there, their hands intertwined. Michael smiled softly at me, and I could see the unspoken gratitude in his eyes. "Thanks for everything, Mom," Emily said, her voice full of emotion. "For showing me what it means to stand up for myself. For showing me that I'm worth it." I smiled, my heart full. "You always were, honey. You just had to see it for yourself." And then, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I knew that no matter what the future held, they would be okay. They had each other. They had learned how to fight for what was right, how to protect what mattered, and how to love without fear. In that moment, I was reminded of the most important lesson a mother can teach her child: never let anyone take away your worth. And if they try, fight back. Because you are always worth fighting for.